Welcome to She Built That with Julie Nichols, where I interview female founders about their journeys to business success. Today, my guest is Fern Schumer Chapman, an award-winning author of several books, including Motherland, a mother-daughter journey to reclaim the past, and Brothers, Sisters, Strangers, about sibling estrangement and the road to reconciliation. She is also a frequent speaker at schools and conferences, and she's a coach on sibling estrangement. Fern, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Julie. It's great to be with you.
I know, Fern. So I got introduced to Fern through my friend Wendy Whittam, who is also brilliant. And Fern and I just hit it off. We met at a restaurant and we connected over our Jewish backgrounds, because immediately when you're Jewish and you meet somebody Jewish, you just kind of go nuts. And so we played, 6 degrees of Jewish geography, which, usually only is 1 degree, because especially in the Chicago area, every Jewish person knows each other somehow. So I was so delighted to learn all about your books and your mother's story. And I can't wait for you guys to hear more about Fern. So, Fern, I'm going to let you do some of the talking, and I would love for you to just give us a little introduction on who you are and what you do.
Well, I started out as a journalist, and I actually worked at the Chicago Tribune for many years. And when I started to have children myself, I cut back at the Tribune and started freelancing. My mother, who had never spoken of her own history and kept it hidden, she had been an unaccompanied minor at the age of 12 and come to this country alone, and her parents were murdered in the Holocaust, never spoke of this. And I felt like there was a black hole on that side of my own personal history. And I was very curious about it, but I also knew never to discuss it because she did not want to go there. Well, when I was 6 months pregnant with my third child, she came to me and out of the blue and said she wanted to go back to this little town in Germany. And that was the break point that changed my life, because even though I was 6 months pregnant, she and I traveled to Stuttgart am Rhein, which is an hour south of Frankfurt. It is a little town where there were 2 Jewish families before the Holocaust and only 2,000 people. So unlike returning to Berlin or Hamburg, which are larger cities, this was a very intimate window on the experience of the town and what had happened in the town and the legacy of the Holocaust. And so I had a unique opportunity, and I took advantage of it. And my first book is a memoir, Motherland, and it captures the first few visits we took to this little town.
Your story is so incredible. Your mother's story, the story of how the two of you went back, and it is... that story has then spitballed and it has changed into other things now. And this, you guys listening at home, you may be like, why is Fern on this podcast? This podcast is about female founders. So to me, Fern is like the quintessential female founder, because she started with a book, and that book grew to a play. It is now turning into a, hopefully a series on, some streaming platform to be determined. But then you also have managed to build your career into so many other avenues that we were talking before we went, live recording this, about how I am just in such admiration of how your career has grown over the years and how you've been able to build stable, sustainable income from various streams of revenue. And that's really what I want to hear about, especially. So I would love to kind of go back in time a little bit to when you wrote this book, the first book, Motherland. And I want to know, how did that transition into becoming a full-time writer? What did that look like? What was the moment where you decided, you know what, I'm going to lean into writing, and that this is really what I want to do? And how did you manage that? How did that income? And I know that you're a mother of 3, and could you please give us some background on how that all started?
Well, books often become a platform for other opportunities. And so I wrote Motherland and suddenly received many awards and invitations to speak. And so suddenly I had a speaking career. And I was going to women's luncheons and synagogues and churches because people were curious, not just about the story of how the Holocaust had shaped this little town, but about the transformation in my relationship with my mother. Because my mother wouldn't speak of her history, it really limited my connection to her. And so this journey and that book completely changed all that. And my mother's response to that, which we can talk about if you like, was fascinating as well because it changed her too.
Well, please let's talk about that while we're on the topic. Like, what was her reaction?
First of all, her attitude was, who's going to care? Who's going to read this? I've written a couple of books about her. So for one of the first ones I wrote was Motherland, and then the second one, which is used in middle schools, is called Is It Night or Day? And when I interviewed her for that, she kept saying, I don't understand who's going to read this. Well, she ended up coming with me to every school and becoming a rock star. And it actually helped her process the trauma of the experience. So actually, to recover from trauma, you need two things. You need to take the terror out of the story, and you also need witnesses. And she received, through the speeches, a very unique form of therapy because I took the terror out of the story by telling it over and over again, and all those students became her witnesses. And they asked questions I didn't dare ask. Like, what was it like the last time you saw your parents? So this was
I just got the chills when you just said that. Like, to think of like these children connecting to that story and like internalizing it and being like, oh my God, what would it feel like to see my parents for the last time and never see them again?
Well, I'll tell you, for the kids, they started to feel like, I never thought of this, and I don't want to take my parents for granted. And I mean, we had remarkable experiences. So, for example, at one school, a young girl came up to my mother and told her she was being sexually abused. And my mother came over to me and told me, and I said, we need to report this. And it ended up with the school getting involved in a case like that. And why did that happen? Because my mother's story was tragic and abusive and vulnerable. And others felt comfortable talking to her because she had lived through some of what they were going through.
Oh my God, I can relate to that so much right now in my own life. Anyway, another episode for another time. But I would love to hear more about, you were getting recognition, you were getting awards for this book. What happened next? I want to hear about the process to figuring out like, wow, this could be a play. This could be something on a larger scale.
Every person who heard this story was struck by its uniqueness. And so I shared it with many people. And in time, for example, a playwright approached me and said, we need to do this as a play. And so we wrote the play. We had this other incredible experience where students in a class in Naperville read Is It Night or Day and asked me what happened to my mother's best friend on the ship when they were 12, Gerda Katz. And of course, I didn't have an answer because I hadn't really tried hard to find her. She also changed her name, and so I didn't know who I was looking for. Well, anyway, 3 months later, my mother is calling me when I'm traveling in Boston and giving speeches and trying to reach me and leaving voicemails and emails and even texts, which she never did, and saying, call me, call me, call me. And when I finally reach her, she says, she can't say anything for the first few minutes. And then she says the word Gerda. And I said, did you hear from her? And she said, yes. Those kids made it a class project to locate and reunite these two old friends who hadn't seen each other in 72 years. So the Oprah Winfrey Show came in and heard about this, did a half-hour show on this. So what I'm trying to tell you is it's a building process. One incident leads to the next. And that has continued, and it continues to this day. So how did I build this? well, one little step at a time, and kind of trusting in the future that something was going to happen in some way.
And you were brave enough to go to that, like whenever a new door opened, you welcomed it, because I think that's a big part of it, is that, when whatever your business is, when you're a founder, it's having those guts to be like, yeah, this is a great opportunity and I'm going to jump and I'm going to do it. Because you very easily could have been like, no, it's too much. Like, no, don't want to do a play. No, not interested in Gerda. Just want to stay within my lane. But you chose not to. Why? Why did you decide to?
I felt I had a unique story. And if I didn't tell it, who would? So, and I continue to do that. So, for example, my mother's family in Germany, the Westerfelds, had a young girl who lived with the family. She spoke out loudly against the Nazis. For her actions, she paid her entire life. One of the things she said, and I'm going to give you chills again, when the Nazis were gaining power, she had gone to a cooking class, and they had tried to force her to Heil Hitler and put a sign for Hitler in her window, and she refused. Teacher of the cooking class said to her, "You need, when you are living among the wolves, you need to howl with the wolves." And she was outraged. And she came home and wrote on the back of a photograph of my grandmother, Frida Westerfeld, "I will not howl with those wolves." I tell you this because I am now working on a book called "I Will Not Howl with Those Wolves," about Mina's story as a housekeeper who spoke out and defied the Nazis. And
Sorry, if you're not watching, if you're listening, I'm waving because my eyes are welling up with tears right now at just the thought of this and how incredible it is, especially at this current time in our world and everything that's going on with the current administration, and the importance of being brave and speaking out. And I'm getting verklempt, everybody at home. So,
she was 19 years old.
oh my God.
And she paid her entire life for her choices. So I am working on a young adult book called "I Will Not Howl with Those Wolves," that's based on what happened to her. And it is an inspiring story. In fact, Julie, I'm looking at you, but I'm also looking at her photograph. I'll show it to you. That's taped onto, this is Mina.
I don't know why, like, seeing her picture is suddenly making it very real.
I look at it every day, so it's real.
Oh boy. Here comes the Kleenex, Fern. Everybody, get out your Kleenex. Oh, well, my goodness.
So I tell you this, Julie, because you ask why. Why? Because who else has this story? And I have to tell you, it's not easy. Publishing is really tough right now. Selling a young adult book like this, it will not be easy. But I don't let that get in my way. I do it anyway. I've written 4 chapters because I believe in this.
Tell us about, I know you and I know your journey, and that's why I want to know the transition from, writing about your mother's story and, going to schools and spreading the word about what she went through, and then pivoting to sibling estrangement. I would love to hear about that transition, how it happened, why it happened, and where it's taken you.
People think that I am writing on 2 different tracks. I am not writing on 2 different tracks. I am writing on 1 track. What do I mean? Sibling estrangement, which sadly I endured for many decades, is often the result of a traumatic childhood. Holocaust families, guaranteed, have traumatic upbringings. So I am very much about the intergenerational trauma of the experience of the Holocaust and the second generation. The reason I speak about this is, and the reason I ended up in the corner of sibling estrangement, is because my brother and I only have 1 brother, had very different reactions to our Holocaust mother. His reaction was to beat feet and to distance himself as much as possible. My reaction was to care for her and serve as a kind of surrogate parent because she had lost her parents at such a young age. It is a psychologically defining experience. And I'm often asked at schools, why do you write about this? Why do you talk about this? This didn't happen to you. And I always have the same answer, which is, yes, it did. I lived with the Holocaust every single day of my life.
And how did that shape you as a person?
Profoundly. And so really, I'm so glad we're talking about this, because I really see these two stories as so interconnected. I am sick, and I don't want to get into the politics of this, but anytime there's cultural genocide, I am sick. Why? Because this doesn't just damage one person. This damages generations. And it takes generations to recover from this. And I'm the second generation of this, and I know how hard it's been for me. And it's still hard for my kids. And so, so I think Native Americans say it takes 7 generations to heal from a trauma. And I don't think we understand that. And war is not just about the combat and even the children who are obviously devastated by this. It's about the lineage of these kids.
I want to hear more about how you took your experience with your own sibling estrangement with your brother and how that became a book. Could you walk me through that?
Well, it's involved. My brother and I didn't speak for decades, and my mother sensed he was in a very dark place. And after decades of no talk, my mother leaves this desperate voicemail on my, at that time, machine, and said, he's doing terribly and you've got to do something. I need you to call him. And my response was, wait a minute, we haven't talked in so long. Call him. So, of course, that raises all the questions of what are my obligations to him? What are my obligations to the family? What are my obligations to my mother? And that's where Brothers, Sisters, Strangers starts. And I figured, I will call him. He won't answer. And I will have fulfilled my obligation to my mother to be done with this particular part of the scenario. Well, that's not what happened. I called him. He immediately called me back. And suddenly I was confronted with all of his issues and the possibility of rebuilding this relationship in the wake of terrible mistrust and betrayal. And so Brothers, Sisters, Strangers starts there. And what it does is it's part memoir, also part social science, and also other people's voices. So I'm weaving these 3 parts throughout Brothers, Sisters, Strangers in an attempt to help others understand what I call this devastating experience of mourning the living.
Mourning the living. That's such a powerful statement.
So I see this rooted in my mother's history, because my mother lost her family at a very young age, and she didn't know how to create a family. She didn't know how to support and encourage bonds between my brother and me. And as a result, he and I ended up not talking for years.
So in writing this book, I know that you're not a mental health professional. We've discussed this before. Who did you bring in to help you with this?
There aren't that many specialists in siblings, which is interesting. Freud actually mentions siblings only 5 times, I think, in all of his volumes. Siblings is a largely under-researched and under-acknowledged aspect of psychology. But I did find a few people, and there is research that, not a lot, but there has been more research in the last 20 years. And so I found the few books on the topic and leaned on those. I also interviewed a lot of people who were also estranged from siblings to try to understand the effect of this. And, it's a really complicated experience, because some people are disconnecting from a toxic sibling to protect themselves. and others are hurt by this. Um, there are actually risk factors for estrangement, which I didn't understand before I started all this. And that was really enlightening to me as well. And by the way, my brother and I pretty much fall into every risk factor.
I want to hear more about that transition into, because I know now that you are a sibling estrangement coach, and, you were previously doing a lot more like public speaking about your mother's story. And then now you've kind of pivoted into a whole other realm. Like, can you talk me through,
Yeah.
how that happened? What were the
Yeah.
circumstances?
So again, you have to follow what's presented to you. And I wrote the book, and suddenly I was getting inundated with emails from people who were estranged. And they were saying, I've talked to therapists and they don't really understand this field. Do you do coaching? And it's like, well, I don't, but maybe I should. And one thing led to another. And I want to emphasize to you, it sounds like I am not coaching all the time. I have a few clients I work with. It varies from week to week, month to month, how many I'm working with. Because typically what happens with these people is they come for a few sessions, they get what they need, and then they go on about their way. I actually see myself mostly as a writer and a speaker. And I continue to go into the schools and talk to middle schoolers, sadly without my mother now, who has passed away. But that is how I see myself. That's my self-definition as a speaker and a writer.
How did you manage being a mother of three and being a writer and being, like a speaker and going to all these events, and like, tell me about that.
It was very difficult. And Motherland was my first experience with all this. And I had a lot of speaking opportunities. And of course, the book, to some extent, is about being a very different mother to my own children than my mother was. I wanted to be more present and not as absorbed in the past. But then all of a sudden, I'm being pulled away by these opportunities, and I felt like somehow I was falling into the same trap. So it was really challenging. I tried to manage, as we all do, within the school day as much as possible. It wasn't always possible. I had a lot of travel opportunities, and I did things like, I remember I had a great 8-city tour where I was paid to give presentations at banks. And in order to placate my children, I took the entire amount that I earned and paid for a ski vacation so they could meet me out there and have a nice time. I mean, I did creative things in order to make it work. I think of my 3 children, some of them would say that they suffered because of it. And my daughter says it inspired her. So you never know how it's going to land with a kid.
And you can't really win, because it's like, as a woman, as a mother, trying to juggle everything, I read something the other day that was so interesting to me. The idea of, that we're always juggling these balls in the air, but some of them are glass and some of them are plastic. And that, you need to know which ones are the glass and which ones are plastic, because, the glass ones that fall, those are the really important things. And at any given moment, it might be that a glass one is a child related one, or it may be a work related one. But sometimes you need to let some of the plastic ones fall so that you can catch the glass ones. And the plastic ones could be, maybe like your kid needs you to make them a sandwich. But the glass one is, oh my God, I have a deadline. If I don't have this in time, my client's going to be so upset at me. And then alternatively, it might be the opposite. So it's knowing which ones are the glass ones and which ones are plastic.
Yeah, I'm not sure I was that great at that. I think I dropped a lot of balls, plastic and glass. One thing that upsets me when I think back on all this is, if I had been a man, this would have been supported and facilitated. But as a woman, I was expected to hold down the fort in addition to everything else. And I think if we could form more equal partnerships, it would work a lot better for everyone. And I see that changing. I see my daughter as much more of an equal partner with her husband than certainly I was in my first marriage.
And freaking men to that, Fern, because it's still, I mean, even amongst, you know, me, I'm in my mid 40s and I feel like, I grew up a feminist and being told that I can do whatever I want and that I could have it all. And it still has been a struggle. So it's interesting how, things change, they're getting better. But, I'm hoping that at least my children's generation, this Gen A, are they now? Are they Z or A? I don't even know. But I'm hoping for my boys, I'm trying to teach them the importance of, when you're in a relationship, pulling, being a 50-50 partner. That's something that's really important to me. And I feel like a lot of it is teaching our boys what the expectation is. So that I'm setting them up for success. I was not, I was not given the opportunity to be a mother to a girl. And so I feel particularly responsible to make sure that my boys are good partners and good fathers in the future.
Which will mean a richer life for them.
Yeah. And for their children and their partners, whoever they may be. But, I'm trying to beat it into them right now. Like, not actually beating my children, everybody. Don't get
your future daughter-in-law thanks you.
Right. Or son-in-law, whatever they want to do. I don't care. Whatever. As long as they're amazing, just pick somebody good is all I'm saying. Fern, we are getting close to the end of our time here, but I would love to hear what's next for you. I know that you spoke a little bit about this book you're writing, and are there any other projects you'd like to share with us?
Well, actually, my husband and I just completed a book which was great fun to write. It's called 90, A Conscientious Objector's Journey of Quiet Resistance. And it's about his unfortunate number in the Vietnam lottery draft and what he did about it. And more importantly, he makes the most important masculine decision in the absence of any male guidance because his father had died just before the lottery. And so the book is a memoir, and it brings you along upon this journey of finding surrogates who will guide him and how difficult it was to establish himself as a CO during that time in San Diego, which was one of the most conservative and militaristic draft boards in the country. And he was the first non-religious conscientious objector in San Diego history. And
wow.
So it's his story. And people say they can't put it down. And I try to write every book so that you're not looking at your phone.
So is that book is available for sale?
It's available now on Amazon and other bookstores.
Okay, well, I'll make sure to link that in the show notes so that people can look that up if they want. And are there any other things you want to share with us?
No, but if anybody wants to publish I Will Not Howl with Those Wolves, I'd love to hear from them.
Perfect. We're putting it out there like The Secret. We're going to, remember that? Remember The Secret? Oh my God. We're going to put it out there like Oprah. Okay. Well, Fern, it's been such a delight to talk to you, to hear your mother's story. Once again, it's not new to me, but I'm sure it's going to inspire so many people. And also, those of you, if any are out there, I do urge you to look up the book, Brothers, Sisters, Strangers, if you are estranged from a sibling, because I've heard so many people, it's really just helped them so much. So check that book out as well. And Fern, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks. I did want to say one last thing, and that's that all of the books that I write have been somewhat popular in book clubs. So
that is a good note. Book club people. I know I have a lot of book club people that listen to this show. So heads up on that one, everybody. All right, Fern, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for listening to She Built That with Julie Nichols podcast. I am Julie Nichols. I do marketing for small businesses. So if your business needs help finding their ideal customers and getting their attention online, give me a call. You can find me at julienicholsmarketing.com. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.